All right, Richard, thank you for being here this morning. 28,000 viable organs get wasted in the United States, as far as I know. I don't know if I'm accurate about that number or maybe it's global. I believe it's in the United States. And I believe that 9,200 of those are kidney organs. Why?
Yeah, it's a very complicated question, right? As you mentioned, 29,000 organs discarded. To be fair, not all of them are viable, but what we found is most of them are viable. Especially with kidneys, 19 people are dying a day waiting on dialysis. Actually, if you get on dialysis, there's a 40% mortality rate within 3 to 4 years. So
Wow.
it's not a good prognosis, right, when needing an organ. Policy, the system's designed to where people are in a wait list of need, which is important. That is very important to try to go in order, but especially these, medically complex organs, right, have to be offered to every single person in the list in order. And what makes that a struggle is by the time you get down to the 1,000th or 2,000th person on the list, the organ isn't viable anymore, right? So they've either taken it out, the person's died, depending on deceased donor or living donation. It's a very complex, and then there's a logistics problem too, right? So if we have an organ in Florida and it's got to get all the way out to California, right? We've got to take that into consideration, weather, logistics. And the system just isn't designed for that high demand, over 100,000 people in need, and the supply is increasing as we go along.
Wow. So how you got involved into, let me back up. Something very special about you. You're a U.S. Army veteran, right? You serve in active duty. You also serve in the reserve.
Correct.
You work for the Department of Defense, which is now known as the Department of War.
Correct.
PhD, you're a researcher.
Correct.
So how you ended up working with organs now?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. So, 5 years ago, about 5 years ago today, I did not know this problem existed. It's that need that wasn't as big. And it was back in, about 5 years ago in 2021, I was looking for PhD dissertations, looking for topics, and right. And so it needed to be something that's passionate, right? I wanted to solve a real problem. I didn't want to just pick something out of the air and study, something, not important to me. And about that time, I actually got thyroid cancer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And was sitting in the shower, and my wife's like, "Hey, there's a lump in your throat. You need to go get that checked out." Turns out I'm fine now, but had a whole thyroidectomy.
No symptoms, just a lump.
It was just a huge lump in my throat. Wow. Yeah, it was weird. I'd been going to the doctor at the VA under VA care, and they didn't notice it. Right, it took my wife just saying "Hey, that's really weird. I didn't know there's something protruding from your throat." Yeah. Once I got into surgical care, VA was great. They took good care of me, so I appreciate that. So after that, I really did think I got a second chance at life. Right. And this topic came up and said, hey, kidney discard back then was at 19%. There's this kidney discard problem, maybe artificial intelligence can help. Maybe it can't. We don't know. Is this something you'd like to study? The unfortunate part is, the 4 or 5 years I took to finish my PhD, kidney discard almost doubled. So we're at almost 35, 36% of kidneys.
So it went from 19% to 30.
It's 35 and then has gone down to 34, thank goodness. But still, just not, almost doubled in 5 years. It blows my mind that this problem has doubled in the time that we've been trying to work on it.
What's the problem?
Yeah, so again, demand's increasing.
Got you. Okay.
Right? Yeah. And then the donor of 10 years ago, right, isn't the donor of today, right? We're trying to get more organs from deceased donors, from older donors, right? Because we have this so much need, 19 people dying a day, over, like you mentioned, over 100,000 people who need these organs, right? So, I mean, we're trying to expand the supply. It's not there. They're doing the best they can. But then again, the system's not, in my opinion, the system needs to be overhauled and policy needs to be reviewed to be able to, use new technologies to identify people faster.
So is the current system a database, and then all these networks have access to it, or how does it work right now, the logistics of getting an organ from here to Houston?
Great question. So like we start with, organ procurement organizations, right? So if you ever went to get your driver's license, right, they ask you, in some places, not all places, but when I went to get my driver's license, they asked me, hey, do you want to be an organ donor? Right. And this was many, many years ago in Georgia. And then in Florida, they asked the same thing. Right. And they check the box. Some people, what's really weird is, that's, you heard that, but even then I still don't think about like what that really means. And so what's funny is, or maybe sad too, but like my niece, right, just turned 15, getting her driver's license. And they asked her, hey, would you like to be an organ donor? And she's like, what does that mean? Right. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean you're going to take my organs now, right? And this was her honest response. And 10 years ago, I wouldn't have blinked an eye at that question. I was like, oh, maybe that's weird too, right? Like, just depends on the person. That's fine. That's own personal preference. But now it's much different, right? Knowing the problem, I'm like, no. After I explained, like, oh no, these organs, like, if you die, you can choose to give, 7, 8, 9 people a second chance at life. What a way to go at, like, for me, that like gives me even more meaning that like some of my organs can use that, or some of my tissue, my eyes can like be used for somebody else. And I mean, it's not just adults, it's kids, babies, like it's a really powerful choice to be able to give so much life to others. Right. And really can do one decision can make a huge change. And so that's at the very beginning. So I always give the option, like if I die tomorrow, right? Even if I'm registered, even if I said I absolutely want to be, donate all my organs, that's actually not my choice. It's actually my wife's choice. It's my next of kin, right? So Whitney has to say yes. Whitney is my wife, would have to say yes. Right. And so what happens if I'm on my deathbed tomorrow, I'm gone, I've died, they will call Whitney and say, hey, we're an organ procurement organization. Richard was registered, right? That was his wish, but ultimately that is your decision. Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, honestly, till about 5 years ago when we started looking at this problem. Right. So there's that whole problem, right? Even if I said yes, Whitney, maybe, there's many, many reasons, right? It's a very emotional time, right? It's a very hard decision, right? But, keeping those people informed is important, right? The like mentioning, hey, like this can help a bunch of people, right? And reinforcing that always helps. And so, so if she said yes, right? And so then, right, they would start going through all my organs. So, lungs, heart, liver, kidney, and they do go down a list in order and they start offering it to people. This is where the gridlock starts, right? So they have to call the transplant centers. It's usually done by phone. There is an automated system that they use to offer those systems, but it almost usually, like if they offer it, they're always, the surgeons are looking at their list, the person that it's offering. They have to have 30 minutes, right, to make this decision. It could be 2 a.m., right? And you're like, just woke up somebody, right, to make this decision, right? And it's a doctor, right? This is a very intensive process.
And then the human factor we can commit
100%.
That's the problem. Too. At 2 a.m.?
At 2 a.m., yeah, I don't know. Me at 2 a.m., I wouldn't. I don't know what, I'm not, if I'm making the best decisions at 2 a.m., right? So it's hard, though. It's hard, right? And we're talking about life. So let's be serious, right? Like, maybe the organs aren't viable, right? Maybe I got in a car crash instead, right? And a pole went through my kidney, right? So maybe, some of these organs can't be used, but a lot of them, we find that yes, actually for the right person, could be used, especially with all this need. And so that's where we found in my PhD research is like most of the gridlock, the time wasted, the I would call it inefficiency in the system is really finding the right person to put with. And it's a hard problem, right? Because you want to be fair, right? Because they are listed in medical need, right? So the person who's one on the list is the most sickest, been usually waiting the most time, right? That's very typical. And the person on the bottom, right, maybe just got on the list. So like, here's the scenario, right? So if you need a kidney, right, and you've been waiting 5 years on dialysis, right, and I got on last month, is it really fair to give a kidney to me? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. Right. Maybe I'm going to die tomorrow. Maybe you've still got 5 more years of life, right? But what we try to say is we use artificial intelligence, right? Studying the past 5 years of data that says, hey, if you don't give it to Richard, it's going to go in the trash, right? Which is important.
Why is that? What, I mean,
let's say you're higher up on the list, right?
Okay.
But
I'm number 1 or number
2. You're number 2.
Yeah.
But you're in Oregon, right?
Okay.
And the Oregon's in Florida, and I'm in Florida.
Okay.
Right? And we say, oh, but like we can't catch a plane till tomorrow. And by the time it gets there, it's going to have 20, 30 hours of cold ischemia time, which is just like time on ice, right? To transport it, right? And by the time it gets into you, it is not going to be viable for you, right? And we can predict that up front, though. I can tell you that up front.
So it's more about the logistics.
Logistics is one piece, right?
Yeah.
So the other piece that you honestly have to register is like, how long does this kidney need to last for? If I'm 80, right? Or if I'm 75 and like maybe I only have 5, 10, 15 more years of life, right? I don't need the same kidney as I'm going to put in a child or like even a 20-year-old, right? That kidney's got to last decades, right? That's what we want. So we want we want more viable kidneys going into younger folks because we expect them to, it's got to last a long time. Right? So it's complex. It's not just logistics. Trust me, logistics is a problem, but it's all this back and forth as well to get the right kidney in the right person, right? And you're asking hundreds of people are involved in this process. And like you said earlier, the human factor, right?
Right.
If it's 2 a.m., we in our algorithm, we put time, right? Because if you're making an offer at Saturday morning at 2 a.m., not as many people will say yes if you offer it Tuesday at noon, right? When everybody's normally working. It's just a fact of life, how the system works.
Wow. All right. So you had a thesis, finished your PhD.
Yep.
Discover a problem, came up with a solution. So tell us where you're at now with the solution and how are you contributing to helping what you just described, which is a huge problem in the organ donation industry that we have here in the United States.
Great question. So we started out with our first algorithm, right? So Dr. Ashiku, which is my chief technology officer of Valiant AI, and myself, right, co-founded this company and have brought it out to 5 organ procurement organizations. I'm proud to say we've done over 85 kidneys that would have ended up in the trash and are now in people. Yeah. It also, so far, right, has 100% graft survival. That means all the kidneys that were used, right, were actually did a 90-day survival. That's a good thing, right? So because we don't want artificial intelligence or any algorithms, right, that are used to hurt the problem, right? We don't want it to have a negative impact on society, right? So it's very important to see both the before and after effects of using artificial intelligence. And so I do want to make, this is a really good point to bring up here, but I know we say artificial intelligence, right? So it turns out, all of the system are using mathematical equations, algorithms, right? So it's called linear regression, right? Okay. So it's a mathematical method that came up decades ago. And the reason why AI, in my opinion, has come up is because now we have the compute power to be able to do some of these things more advanced.
Right.
And so, so when people say AI,
Yeah.
right, it sometimes scares people, which is fair, right? Because there's a lot of like negative use cases.
But we had AI all along, the calculator, right?
That's right, right? Like so, like it's just mathematical,
Yeah.
like probabilities and statistics, right? It's just a more advanced way to do it, and now we have a lot more data too.
Yeah.
But the only reason I bring that up is because we want to make sure it's still fair, right? We want to make sure we're not putting kidneys in patients unnecessarily, right? So that's why we track graft survival as well. So we've done that. We're now making a transplant surgeon version, right, for the hospitals, because it's important. It's important for organ procurement organizations to know, that this kidney is viable, or if it's going to be discarded, right, to be able to put it on I'll call it an expedited pathway, right? But it's also important for the surgeons to understand, who, if I have these 50 people on my list, who does this organ make sense for on my list, right? Has the highest graft survival, and then what's the most fair way, right? Because maybe if you're number one, you're going to get an offer tomorrow, right? Or the next day, right? But if you're number 5,000 on the list, 10,000 plus on the list, right? Maybe you're still waiting years, but you only have months to live.
Do patients get educated on what you're talking here today, right? Do they know the process, or that's also part of the problem?
No, it is. So it's interesting you mentioned that, right? So because especially these marginal kidneys, there is an explanation. There's discussion at the beginning, right? When you get onto, you can register at multiple transplant centers, but you can check a box that essentially says, I will take a high KDPI kidney. Okay, so let me explain that, right? So KDPI is a kidney donor profile index, right? So just think I'm grading these kidneys based off the previous years from 1 to 100. 1's the best, 100's the worst, right? Based on a bunch of characteristics from the donor, right? And so you can take high KDPI kidneys. The problem is, so a research paper just came out just a couple years ago, but that, basically they asked them, and they're like, okay, what does KDPI mean, right? You just check this box, right? We explained it to you. And then like 40% of the people didn't know what they were checking, which is unfortunate, right? Which makes us say like, hey, are we giving the information properly for them to understand, right? For patients to understand, how can we do that better so patients understand what they're actually signing up for?
Do that start when the procurement companies take over, or that start with the primary care?
Great question. So primary cares usually refer out for transplant, right? Okay. So they're visited by like a nephrologist, which looks at the kidneys in this case. And then the transplant surgeons do get involved. So it's a team of care, 100%. And so when they walk them through the process, that's one of the things that they should
be getting that education somehow, some way through that process.
They do, yes. Yeah. And now, just like anything, right? The quality of education, or maybe maybe I didn't have my coffee this morning, and like it's hard, right? I mean, like if you asked me everything on every decision when I went through cancer, right? Like, depending on the day, right, the time, right, the emotional state I was in, maybe I like understood what was going on, maybe I didn't. Yeah.
All right, so pretty cool. Final problem, solution, it's working. You have proved the concept. But before that, because is computer science your background?
No, so I went to, I can go through my educational background and work history.
Well, I'm asking because sometimes, there's a lot of people out there that perhaps have a solution, but they don't take the initiative to do anything about it because they may not have the skills. And they forget that you can always team up with somebody else that is as passionate as you are to help solve a problem, right? So
correct, yeah. So I do not have a computer science background, right? So I have been coding and using AI for about a decade for different problems, right? So for military problems, when I worked for Georgia Tech Research Institute, right? I worked for Lockheed, but definitely not like health or like software, right? And so Dr. Ashiku does have a software background, right? So he was very instrumental in providing that kind of half of the problem. Yeah. But we both did our PhD in systems engineering, right? But it was in artificial intelligence.
Oh, cool. So how do you go about building that team, right? Because take me back to when you had that conversation with him, and as a CEO, right, or as a leader in this project, what were you looking for, and how you were able to tell that he was a right partner?
Yeah. So there's a couple things, right? So the mission, right? So we both were very passionate about solving this kidney problem, right? And organ problem and this discharge. So he shared that passion with me 100%. His work ethic, right? So like I had classes with him, right? I actually had like professors recommend him, right? So he obviously came to the company with working with him previously.
So you had that time to build a rapport with him.
Correct.
Because I've seen other cases where, people get pair up, and then things backfire.
Right.
It's like, don't kiss on the first day. Try to build that relationship and get to know each other first.
Yeah. And so like I think within, I don't know, probably 3 months of asking him, right? I went up to visit his family, right? You've got to have that kind of rapport with somebody you're going to work with and build a company with. And it's been great. He's amazing at what he does, and he's as passionate as myself in solving this problem. But there are lots of problems to work on in this particular problem. Discard is one of them. Authorization's another. Eligibility, right? So like, you have all these referrals of people. Who do you pick? But also, so we brought in board members, right, of like surgeons, right, which are important. We teamed up with some.
Are these advisory board members or board?
They're
directors?
advisory board members.
Okay,
Yes. So they're advisory board members, which are important, right?
Yeah,
you got to like look at all your stakeholders and then bring them in on the team, right? Because myself and Dr. Shiku, as my son would tell me, I'm not a medical doctor, right? I'm a PhD. Yeah. It was important to bring them in, right? And then bring in patient perspectives too, which is the key to really, I think, understanding and, taking years to understand, but you've got to have that team expertise of both surgeons, nephrologists, so doctors, all the doctors that are involved, organ procurement organizations, which are a piece of this puzzle, and then patients themselves, which is ultimately what this is all about, right? Yeah. To get those patients better, get them back to their lives, to be able to live their lives.
So as you're speaking, I'm thinking on, first of all, where you're at today as a business, but also going back, because it's very difficult to break into the medical field for many variables. So take us how you were able to get that first break, and how did that happen?
Yeah, it is very hard, right? So don't get me wrong. It's like I've done military stuff as well, and that has its own challenges with the government. And then the healthcare space is pretty difficult as well, right? Because they basically they said it's like the chicken before the egg. They're like, prove me it's right. Prove me it's going to work with like extensive evidence, right? Before you even start it, right? So it is difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So we worked with Mid-America, so our organ procurement organization was the first. They're a top tier 1 OPO, and leaned forward into innovation, right? So that was good, and met them through my PhD time. Worked on projects with them.
So
then
you were able to build that rapport with them.
Correct.
Yeah,
what
trust,
0 to 1 is the hardest, right? And we saw the results, right? We had like simulated results, and those looked good, right? But as we've experienced of like, depending on the OPO, like 5 to 10% reduction in discard in kidneys, especially for these medically complex kidneys, we could see those results, and then like we had publishable results, right? So we're actually putting a paper together now, right, to be able to say, hey, no, like we've been doing this for now over a year, and we've seen these results. We should look at this as like a national solution, right? Whether it's OPOs adopting it, transplant hospitals, or even like the federal government adopting it.
So what's next? I know that you have some projects out there. You're getting some results. As a business owner, as a CEO, where do you want to take your company, or where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Yeah, great question. I think, you mentioned that this is one piece of the puzzle, right? So the allocation problem, right, is just one specific problem. You mentioned logistics, right? So algorithms that can determine, and estimate how much time it takes to go between place A and place B, how much cold ischemia time is going to add up, right? And then we look left, right? So they just passed an e-referral. So now OPOs are getting double to triple the amount of referrals of all these potential donors. Well, how do you pick which donor, right? You don't really have unlimited resources, right? And so, this is another place where AI and automation can help a lot, right? So we're working on a project right now that just says, hey, look, these are all the eligible donors, right? Which one of these, if we look at the match run, would be the most beneficial to the patients, right, for graft survival? So here's an order of merit, right, of the information that could go. The second thing is even if, like, let's use me an example, right? So I die tomorrow, all my organs, I could save 8 or 9 people, right? But my wife is a wreck, right? Which I don't blame her, right? I would be too, right? Doesn't understand the information, right? The same thing we discussed with KDPI in patients, right? And somebody, gets on the phone and says, hey, like, we're such and such, right? Richard was registered. We're going to go ahead and give his donors, right? Or use all of his organs. Right. And she's like, what do you mean you're going to use all of his organs, right? And maybe I didn't have that discussion with her, right? So we want to use algorithms to, like, help train the folks who are using this, because even if I have the best, I can help 9, 10 people. We want to respect everybody's decision, right? If that's your decision, right? It's definitely not mine, not anybody else's, if you want to donate your organs or not. But let's make sure they know, right, the process. You typically doesn't interrupt with funeral, right? It's not like I'm going to be like all scarred monster. That's not the case, right? They're deeply respectful. It can save lots of lives, right? And to be able to inform that next of kin, right, using the right language and using the right approach, right, we can increase the understanding of what it means to be a organ donor.
And Richard, because I seen like NIH, the National Institute of Health, and NSF, they like to they have calls for organizations, universities, researchers to write proposal to fix the various problems. Have you taken advantage of any of these federal grants to build your company or prove the concept, or have you going after private foundation? How were you able to come up with the funding and the resources to come up with a solution?
Yeah, so resourcing's hard, but fortunate for us, right? We had our customers initially provided money. We bootstrapped ourselves. It's just how we did, and then we had customers who were willing to invest in us, which is nice. So
more like a pilot program.
Right. Okay. Exactly. And so that's really been the funding. But I mean, to your point, that's not how we're going to get it to national scale quickly. Gotcha. Definitely interested and looked at some NIH, so like the SBIR program, though, but it got paused for a year, right? Correct. So it's kind of waiting. But we're definitely interested in looking at some of those solutions and opportunities to be able to get this to the national scale, because that really is the answer, right? It's nice very proud of the 80 plus donors that we use, but in reality, right, this could be thousands. And oh, by the way, right, so compared to dialysis costs, right, because mainly Medicare is paying, this is for kidneys, is paying for that. I mean, you're talking about tens of billions of dollars saved in Medicare with kidney transplants. And that's why it needs to go national. It's just working out how to do that.
You're the second company that I meet that have been successful at starting the pilot route. Right. And for some reason, the solution get to industry much faster than going through the SBIR, STTR process.
Oh, 100%, right? I mean, the SBIR is like $100K, right? I mean, it's nice. Don't get me wrong, but it's
then managing that grant, right?
Correct. Managing that grant versus in a pilot, like you're working with the customer, right? I mean, you're seeing results instantaneously, and especially in healthcare, right, where they want that evidence up front. They want it now before you're able to use it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, man. So tell me a little bit about your military background, and just because I'm a veteran, you're a veteran, and we have other veterans out there that are trying to find a new career, or they're trying to find the next mission. So,
Yeah, so I started out in the Reserve Officer Training Corps at Georgia Tech as a cadet, and then was an officer. Then started as a chemical, biomolecular, radiological, and nuclear officers, the CBRN. NBC for the old vets, right? So either people loved me or hating me, right?
Yeah, we didn't like you.
Yeah, because I'm either using CS gas for proper use of your equipment,
or
if
we
ever
have to
needed.
wear MOP 4.
That's right, MOP 4, right? We're just trying to keep you protection. We are part of that protection warfighter function. So went up to be a captain, then finished my active duty time. And then went into the reserves and actually served as an assistant professor of military science up at Georgia Tech and then at UCF.
Okay, cool.
And then left my time of service there. Still in the IRR, but they don't bother me very much. It's like once a year. So that was like, I want to say that was a really good foundation, right? So, I mean, you get work ethic, right? Veterans have that passion. Right. They make, the evidence is out there. They make great entrepreneurs. But I'm going to be honest, though. It took me, after getting out, like the cancer shook me a little. I went and worked for, academia, right? Worked for Georgia Tech Research Institute, worked for Missouri Science and Technology for a little bit. I think you just get out there. I really do. Like, take a job. Yeah. Take a corporate job, everything's fine, right? I worked for Lockheed Martin. I worked for General Electric Research. Like it took me a while to find my feet, right? Find an organization, find that mission, that purpose to say, okay, now I'm gonna, I was diving myself into those corporate jobs, but I didn't quite find the mission yet, right? And then once I found this, organ discard problem, I was like, oh, this is a problem maybe I can help with. I'm not a doctor, right? But let me see if I can help with this.
So in my case, I felt like I had to live that old life back there in order for me to transition, right? And I didn't want to recognize myself as a veteran or take part of anything that was veteran related, just so I could concentrate on my new chapter. Yeah. And but then I was able to accept that, and I was able to transition. But to your point, you just have to hit the floor running and just keep going.
What I tell my guys who are getting out, and whether they're friends or some family members, is it took me a couple years. Yeah. I didn't, it's if you can get out within months, right, and land your purpose, land your job, your career, I'm happy for you, right? But that was not my experience, right? It took me years to find, really that purpose engine to drive myself again. And network. Yeah. I know there's veteran communities, but reach back to be able to use the resources around, like the UCF Business Incubator, right? Has been able to serve, I know, myself very well as far as networking.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I wish you the best. And let's see how many people we can save.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Hopefully it'll be in the thousands here soon.
All right.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.